Hello everyone. So today we are going to discuss about SA 230, which is audit documentation and audit evidence. So first of all, what is audit documentation? Audit documentation has been defined as a record of audit procedures performed, audit evidence obtained, and the conclusions reached. The other name for audit documentation is working paper. Some examples of audit documentation are audit programs. Here, audit program is given the same meaning as in SC 300. Analysis. Issues memoranda. By issues memoranda, we mean to say the rough work, say for example, the rough work which has been done by the auditor has to also be included in the audit documentation. Summaries of significant matters. Checklists. Checklists are basically the auditor will prepare a list of the procedures to be performed. He would list it down, and that has also to be included in the audit documentation, or it forms a part of the audit documentation. लेटर्स ऑफ कन्फर्मेशन एंड रिप्रेजेंटेशन. अगर मैनेजमेंट या फिर दोज चार्ज विद गवर्नेंस दैट इज़ TCWG ने कोई कम्युनिकेशन करी है ऑडिटर के साथ और उससे कोई भी इंफॉर्मेशन मांगी है, सो दैट इज़ इंक्लूडेड इन द लेटर ऑफ कन्फर्मेशन एंड इट फॉर्म्स अ पार्ट ऑफ ऑडिट डॉक्यूमेंटेशन. Correspondences of significant matters. Correspondence of significant matters, by this we mean to say the discussions which have been done on the significant matters by the auditor with the entities, management, or those charged with governance. Also, the correspondences or communications which have been done through email are also to be included in the audit documentation. Now we come to the nature and purpose of audit documentation. It has been divided into two parts: basic purpose and additional purpose. So we'll begin with the basic purpose for audit documentation. Both talk about evidence. First is evidence of auditor's basis for a conclusion about the achievement of overall objective. The overall objective, which we know through SA 200, which is to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatements and they are prepared as per applicable FRF. Second, and evidence that audit was planned and performed in accordance with SAs and legal and regulatory requirement. Here, if the auditor wants to prove that he was not negligent in his work, he can provide audit documentation as an evidence for that. Additional purpose: planning and performing the audit. Audit documentation helps in planning and performing the audit procedure along with the engagement team members. Second, direction, supervision, and review of audit work. It assists the members of the engagement team to direct and supervise the audit work and to discharge their review responsibilities in accordance with SA 220. Establishing accountability. Documentation also helps us in enabling who is accountable for the work that has been done and the procedures which have been performed. Record of matters significant to future audits. It is one of the most important point because when in the next year audit will be done, it will act as a record for what procedures were adopted or what audit evidence was obtained and the conclusions that were reached. It enables quality control review and inspection, which is done in accordance with SQC1. Conduct of external inspection. Audit documentation also enables the conduct of external inspection in accordance with the applicable legal, regulatory, and other requirements. Following are not needed to be recorded or documented. Superseded drafts. Superseded drafts are basically, we can say in short, the rough working papers of the auditor which he made for his own reference, or the torn or mutilated documents. Incomplete or preliminary notes. Again, incomplete or preliminary notes refer to the work which was done by the auditor for himself and not to be included, and which was not meant to be included in the audit report or the documents made. Documents with typographical or other errors. Sometimes there may be some documents in which there are typographic errors or some other errors, or there may be duplication of documents. That is also not needed to be recorded in the audit document. Ownership of audit documentation. As per SQC 1, it is the property of the auditor. Auditor shall exercise reasonable diligence for its custody and confidentiality. So SQC 1 says that that audit documentation is the property of the auditor, and he shall be diligent and keep the documents in safe custody and maintains confidentiality. यानी कि ऑडिटर को नेग्लिजेंट नहीं होना चाहिए अपने ऑडिट डॉक्यूमेंट को संभालने में. Auditor may show it to his client, but that should not hamper its validity and independence in case of assurance engagement. अगर auditor चाहे, so he may at his discretion show some part of it or reproduce the texts to the client. However, it should not hamper its validity. That is, auditor को हर चीज़ अपने client को disclose नहीं करनी है. एंड इन केस ऑफ एन अश्योरेंस इंगेजमेंट उसकी इंडिपेंडेंस यहाँ पे हर्ट नहीं होनी चाहिए. Preparation of audit documentation should be on a timely basis to enhance the quality of work and help in effective review and evaluation. So auditor को जो documentation है वो timely basis पे prepare कर लेना चाहिए ताकि उसकी quality of work improve हो सके, and वो ये फैसिलिटेट करता है इफ़ेक्टिव रिव्यू एंड एवेल्यूएशन ऑफ ऑडिट वर्क, ताकि ऑडिटर की जो फाइनल रिपोर्ट प्रिपेयर होती है उससे पहले ही हमारे पास सारी चीज़ें लिखी हो कि हम लोग ने क्या क्या चीज़ें परफॉर्म करी हैं, कौन से ऑडिट एविडेंसेस ऑब्टेन करे हैं, हम लोग कैसे उन कंक्लूजन्स पे पहुँचे हैं. ऑल्सो द वन थिंग दैट शुड बी केप्ट इन माइंड इज़ जो ऑडिट डॉक्यूमेंटेशन हम लोग ड्यूरिंग द ऑडिट वर्क परफॉर्म करते हैं, it is more accurate than the audit documentation which has been done after the audit work is performed. Audit file. One or more folders or other storage media in physical or electronic form containing records of audit documentation. In short, we can say that audit file is nothing but a compilation of the audit documents which may be in physical form or in other electronic form और स्टोरेज मीडिया. अगर ऑडिटर को इस बात पे शक होता है कि शायद फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स में कोई मटेरियल मिस स्टेटमेंट हो, तो ऑडिटर को अपने ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स को और एक्सटेंड कर देना होता है, जैसे कि टेस्ट ऑफ डिटेल्स, सब्सटैंटिव एनालिटिकल प्रोसीजर्स एंड अदर प्रोसीजर्स, ताकि वो अपने डाउट को कंफर्म कर सके या डिस्पेल कर सके. Subsequent discovery of material misstatements does not by itself indicate a failure to conduct an audit, as there may be some deep-laid frauds which could not be identified in the normal course of examination. However, the auditor should not be negligent. Here we want to say that अगर हम लोगों ने कोई subsequent fraud या error, कोई material misstatement discover करी है, तो हम लोग इस कंक्लूजन पे नहीं पहुंच सकते हैं कि उसमें ऑडिटर की कोई गलती है या फिर ऑडिटर ने अपना काम ढंग से नहीं करा है, और दैट इट इज़ अ फेलियर टू कंडक्ट ऑडिट, बिकॉज कुछ ऐसे फ्रॉड्स हो सकते हैं, एंड वी ऑल्सो नो दैट फ्रॉड्स आर सोफिस्टिकेटेडली डिज़ाइंड सो एज टू कंसील. इसीलिए अगर कोई ऐसे डीप लेड फ्रॉड्स हैं जो इन द नॉर्मल कोर्स ऑफ एग्जामिनेशन वुड नॉट कम इन टू लाइट, देन it will not be considered as a failure to conduct audit. However, the auditor should always remember that he should not be negligent and conduct his audit diligently. Auditor will not be considered as negligent if the work was carried out in accordance with essays and legal and regulatory requirements. All this can be checked through audit procedures, audit evidence, appropriateness and sufficiency and suitability of auditor's report in the audit documentation. सो इसीलिए ऑडिट डॉक्यूमेंटेशन का रोल और बढ़ जाता है, क्योंकि ये सारी चीज़ें हम लोग अपने ऑडिट डॉक्यूमेंटेशन में रिकॉर्ड करते हैं. तो ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स परफॉर्म, दी ऑडिट एविडेंस ऑब्टेन्ड, हाउ सफिशिएंट दे वर, हाउ अप्रोप्रिएट दे वर, एंड द सूटेबिलिटी ऑफ ऑडिटर्स रिपोर्ट. उसने क्या कंक्लूजन दिया है, उसने कैसे अपने प्रोसीजर्स को इम्प्लीमेंट किया था टू कंपेल दोज डाउट्स और टू कन्फर्म दोज डाउट्स. इसलिए ऑडिट डॉक्यूमेंटेशन की इम्पोर्टेंस और बढ़ जाती है. Factors affecting form, content and extent of audit documentation. Size and complexity of the entity. So जितनी ज़्यादा एंटिटी का साइज़ बड़ा होगा या फिर एंटिटी कॉम्प्लेक्स नेचर की होगी, उतना ही ज़्यादा हमारा जो एक्सटेंट ऑफ ऑडिट डॉक्यूमेंटेशन है, इट विल बी मोर. nature of audit procedures performed, risk of material misstatement. If there is more risk, then we'll have to explain the audit procedures performed and there will be more documentation. The audit the audit evidence obtained, the nature of exceptions identified. By exceptions, we mean the inconsistencies identified by the auditor and the information present in the financial statements. Basis for a conclusion, we'll come to that later, and audit methods and tools. The audit methods and tools which the auditor has applied in his audit procedures will also have an impact on the form, content, and extent of audit documentation. बाय बेसिस ऑफ कंक्लूजन वी मीन दैट अगर ऑडिटर ने कोई ऐसी चीज़ पे प्रोसीजर लगाया है विच इज़ नॉट रेडिली डिटरमाइनेबल, तो उसका जो फॉर्म कंटेंट एक्सटेंट होगा वो ज़्यादा होगा बिकॉज ही हैव टू एक्सप्लेन इट मोर डीपली. हाउएवर अगर वो रेडिली डिटरमाइनेबल है और उस पर ज़्यादा ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स नहीं लगे हैं, देन द फॉर्म कंटेंट एक्सटेंट वोंट बी एज ह्यूज और लेसर. We should also remember that documentation should be such that an experienced auditor can understand the nature, extent, and timing of the audit procedures performed, results of the procedures performed, and the evidence obtained, and significant matters, the conclusions reached, and professional judgment exercised. So, one question that would come to our mind is, who is an experienced auditor? To say it in general, an experienced auditor is an individual. He may be internal to the organization or an external member or a person who has practical audit experience, and he understands the audit processes, the statutory requirements, legal requirements, regulatory requirements, essays, and the business environment of the entity. Auditing and financial reporting issues which are relevant to the entity's industry. If an auditor has a knowledge of all these things, he would be called as an experienced auditor. While documenting the nature, extent, and timing of the audit procedures performed, the auditor should keep the following things in mind. First, the assertions tested. Who performed the audit procedures and when were the audit procedures performed? And third, but not last, who reviewed the audit work performed and the date of such review, that is when such work was reviewed. Following should also be recorded or documented. Discussion of the significant matters with the management. Say for example, the auditor had a discussion on some significant matters with management or those charged with governance, then it should also be included in the audit documentation to increase its quality. Inconsistencies identified by the auditor in financial information. The auditor shall record the inconsistencies or exceptions which has been identified by the auditor in the financial information to increase its relevance. Now we come to auditor's responsibility for a failure to detect fraud and error. Essay 240. Responsibility for prevention and detection rests with management through internal control. It implies that auditor is not responsible. Moreover, there are inherent limitations of auditing. The task becomes even more difficult. In case of doubtful situations, the auditor should extend his procedures to confirm or dispel the doubt. In short, we can say that the responsibility for prevention and detection of fraud and error in an entity rests with the management and those charged with governance, and the auditor does not have a responsibility for it. Moreover, because of the inherent limitations of auditing, there are even more restrictions on the auditor's ability to find those errors and fraud and detect them. However, wherever the auditor is doubtful, he should definitely extend his audit procedures, that is, expand his audit procedures so that he can either confirm the doubt, that is we want to say. Let's move on to the next topic, which is assembly of final audit file. The assembly of final audit file of audit documentation should be done on a timely basis. Here we mean to say that the auditor should complete his work of audit documentation and assembling it in an audit file on a timely basis so as to enhance the quality of the audit documentation. SQC1 provides the time limit to complete this work, which is ordinarily not more than 60 days after the date of audit report. Two things to be kept in mind is it should not be more than 60 days, and 60 days from when? After the date of audit report. Assembly of final audit file is an administrative process and does not involve new audit procedures or drawing conclusions. So basically ऑडिट डॉक्यूमेंटेशन की जो असेंबली होती है वो एक एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव प्रोसीजर होती है, और यहाँ पे ऑडिटर कोई भी नए ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स नहीं परफॉर्म करता है या फिर कोई भी नए कंक्लूजन्स नहीं ड्रॉ करता है. हाउएवर चेंजेस मे बी मेड इफ़ दे आर एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव इन नेचर. अगर कोई चेंजेस करने हैं तो वो सिर्फ एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव नेचर के चेंजेस होने चाहिए इन दी ऑडिट डॉक्यूमेंटेशन. सम ऑफ द एग्जांपल्स ऑफ विच आर deleting or discarding superseded documents, sorting, collating and cross-referencing working papers. Sorting is basically या तो आपने किसी alphabetical order में arrange कर दिया या फिर किसी और order में arrange करा, entity wise arrange करा, audit procedures जो perform करें उसके according अगर arrange करा है, so that will be known as sorting. Collating is collecting the documents together in one place. Cross-referencing of working papers, say for example you have provided a hyperlink for that. साइनिंग ऑफ ऑन कंप्लीशन ऑफ चेकलिस्ट्स. ऑडिटर ने अपने ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स की जो चेकलिस्ट बनाई होगी, आफ्टर द कंप्लीशन ऑफ दोज ऑडिटर उसे साइन ऑफ कर सकता है इवन इफ दीज आर डन आफ्टर द फाइनल असेंबली ऑफ ऑडिट फाइल, because this is of an administrative nature. Documenting the audit evidence. The auditor can document the audit evidence because it is also an administrative nature change. Audit documentation should not be discarded or deleted before the end of retention period. Auditor को अपनी audit documentation को संभाल के रखना होता है and he should not throw it away or discard it before the end of the retention period. By retention period, we mean SQC1 provides for retention of audit documentation which is no shorter than 7 years from the date of auditor's report or if later, the date of group auditor's report. So retention period has been provided by SQC1 which should not be less than 7 years of time from the date of auditor's report and group auditor's report if the case is so. That is group audit in case of a firm which has branches and or subsidiary companies in case of a company's audit. Completion memorandum or audit documentation summary. It contains significant matters which arise in the course of audit work, how those significant matters were addressed. It facilitates review and inspection of large and complex audits, also enables the auditor to know if he was able to achieve his objectives. Objectives of auditor, that is, the objectives which are stated in the essays, be it an individual essay or the overall objective of the auditor. Matters arising after the date of auditor's report. This concept is basically related to essay 560. However, some reference of it has been provided in this essay, that is essay 230. So we'll discuss it here as well. If in exceptional circumstances the auditor performs new or additional audit procedures or draws new conclusions, he shall document the circumstances encountered, the new or additional audit procedures performed, audit evidence obtained, and the conclusions reached, when and by whom the changes were made and reviewed. अगर कोई ऐसे एक्सेप्शनल सर्कमस्टांसेस आ जाते हैं जिसके वजह से ऑडिटर को कोई नए ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स परफॉर्म करने पड़ रहे हैं या कोई नए कंक्लूजन्स रीच करने पड़ रहे हैं, कोई नए कंक्लूजन्स ड्रॉ करने पड़ रहे हैं, तो ऑडिटर उसे भी रिकॉर्ड करेगा. उसकी रिकॉर्डिंग में ऑडिटर विल कीप द फॉलोइंग 3 थिंग्स इन माइंड. ऐसे क्या सर्कमस्टांसेस थे एंटिटी में जिसके वजह से उसे नए प्रोसीजर्स परफॉर्म करने पड़े या नए कंक्लूजन्स ड्रॉ करने पड़े. जो उसने नए प्रोसीजर्स परफॉर्म करे हैं या फिर कंक्लूजन्स ड्रॉ करे हैं या फिर एविडेंसेस ऑब्टेन करे हैं, एंड when these procedures were performed or conclusions reached and by whom they were done and reviewed. Documentation of significant matters and related significant professional judgments. It requires an objective analysis of facts and circumstances. Higher the extent of professional judgment, higher the extent of audit documentation, con- form and content and extent. So, professional judgment. First, we need to know what is professional judgment. Professional judgment is Professional judgment is the application of relevant training, knowledge, and experience in the in making informed decisions in the course of audit work performed by the auditor. It uh, for knowing the profession Judging the significance of a matter is very subjective and it depends on the objective analysis of facts and circumstances. If the extent of professional judgment is high, then audit documentation would also be higher. It helps in explaining auditors' conclusions, reinforce quality, carry subsequent audit. The documentation of professional judgment would help the auditor in explaining the conclusions which he has reached. It helps in reinforcing the quality of the judgment, which we mean to say that if the auditor has reached to a conclusion, it will help in uh, knowing that it helps in explaining auditors' conclusions. Documentation of professional judgment helps in knowing the basis of the auditor's conclusion, reinforce quality. It will help in maintaining the quality of the audit work performed by the auditor, carry subsequent audit. Um, this can audit documentation of the professional judgment can be taken in consideration while carrying out subsequent audit as well. Last, So the last topic is some examples of significant matters. Basically, we are going to know what these significant matters are which need to be documented by the auditor. Results of audit procedures indicating material misstatements. If the auditor performs some audit procedures which he found out to be materially misstated in the financial statements that need to be recorded or documented. Results indicating revision of assessment of risk of material misstatement. If there are any results which have been obtained by the auditor which indicate that auditor needs to revise the assessment of wrong. Say for example, the auditor uh, thought that the IC or the auditor concluded that the IC was strong and the risk of material misstatement is low. But subsequently, he comes to know that the IC is very weak and the risk of material misstatement is high. Then this would be a significant matter. Evidence that could result in modification of opinion. If the auditor finds any evidence which shows that he needs to modify his opinion or give a modified opinion, then it is also a significant matter. Situation causing difficulty in applying procedures. If the auditor faces any situation which causes him a difficulty in applying those audit procedures which he needs to obtain audit evidence, then it should be documented and it is a significant matter. So this is all for today. Thank you.